You know, it's amazing when you think about it how much the media world has changed, like especially over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
I mean, so many platforms and things come and go online.
Absolutely.
It's crazy to think about. But some things really stick around.
Yeah.
And today we're going to do a deep dive into one of those stories.
Right.
The 20th anniversary of this digital-only e-magazine, Pre-Sense.
Precepts, yeah.
Pre-Sense. And we have a really interesting collection of sources here that sort of trace the journey of this publication. And I think it's a great example of how a really clear vision plus just a lot of dedication can really make a lasting impact in the digital world.
Right. And I think for our listener who's, really wants to get a quick grasp of all this, but doesn't want to wade through, all the details.
Right.
This would be a great overview for them.
Yeah.
To see how Presense not only emerged, but also thrived online for 2 decades.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're going to be looking at.
Absolutely. And I think our goal in this deep dive is to really understand, where did Presense come from?
Yeah.
Presense, by the way, is pronounced Presense.
Presense.
Not Presense, but Presense.
Okay.
But where did it come from? What were the fundamental principles behind it?
Yeah.
And what's this unique position that it holds in India's media world?
Yeah.
I think that'll be really interesting.
Absolutely.
So let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
It seems like Presense was there were some things happening before the magazine itself actually launched.
Right. One of the fascinating things is that the story really begins with the Prime Point Foundation, which was an NGO that was established back in December of 1999
Okay.
by Prime Point Srinivasan.
Okay.
And the foundation, really its objective was to enhance the understanding of communication, journalism, and public relations among key stakeholders, like legislators, business leaders, and the general public.
Right.
And, it had a noteworthy beginning right from the start. It was inaugurated by Dr. M.S. Swaminathan,
Wow.
who's a huge figure in Indian agriculture,
Right.
and T.S. Raghavan, who was the chairman of Indian Bank at the time.
Okay, so we have this foundation that's broadly focused on communication.
Yeah.
But what was it about that foundation that sparked the transition to an actual publication?
Right.
Like a digital publication like Presense.
Right.
Because, I mean, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the internet was still kind of, for a lot of people, the internet was still kind of finding its feet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really insightful question, because Prime Point Srinivasan had a remarkably early appreciation for the internet's power to transform things.
Yeah.
And, the interesting thing is he was actually present at the launch of the internet in Chennai back in 1995.
Wow.
So that firsthand experience, really gave him kind of a unique lens to view, how communication was going to evolve.
Yeah.
And even when the internet was incredibly slow, I mean, imagine trying to work with internet speeds of just 18 kilobits.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
In July of 2000.
Wow.
He was already organizing seminars
Yeah.
to educate people about how profound the impact was going to be.
Yeah, yeah.
And he even hosted Professor Srinivasan,
Okay.
who is, a very prominent voice in journalism. He hosted him at one of these early events.
18 kbps, that is so slow.
Oh my gosh, it's unimaginable now.
Unimaginable. It makes you realize, like, how much of a visionary this guy was.
Yes.
Because he was so far ahead of the curve.
Like, exactly.
I'm curious, what was the general reaction to these early seminars that he was holding? I mean, were people receptive to this idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. Prime Point Srinivasan actually said that, there was a lot of skepticism at the time.
Okay.
Because of, the incredibly slow speeds, right?
Yeah.
The World Wide Web. People were joking. They were calling it the World Wide Web.
Right.
And, print media, broadcast media, those were so dominant at that time that the idea of a digital revolution was very abstract for a lot of people.
Right.
And he knew where things were going.
Yeah.
But he said it was difficult to really articulate that to people.
Yeah.
But he persevered, and he ended up conducting 3 seminars on the topic in that year, 2000.
Wow.
So he was really, committed to that.
It speaks volumes, right?
Yeah.
About his vision.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like he was a visionary, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing this whole digital shift very early on.
Yeah.
But Presense wasn't his first, attempt at the online world, was it?
No.
There were some other things he tried before.
Yeah, and these earlier initiatives are really important because they helped him to learn.
Okay.
They were, really important learning experiences for him. So going back as early as 1999, he actually established online discussion groups.
For professionals in PR and the media.
Okay.
And given his close association with Dr. Abdul Kalam, he also started a group that was focused on Dr. Kalam's India vision, which was aimed at engaging young people in social service.
Okay.
And these were happening on platforms like egroups.com and onelist.com,
Right.
which were kind of these early online communities.
Right, yeah.
So he was building online communities
Wow.
even before the idea of a digital magazine had really taken hold.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
So then in 2002,
okay.
we have the PR Point newsletter, which I think is more of a direct
Yeah.
kind of precursor to Presence.
Yeah.
So tell me about that, the PR Point newsletter.
Yeah, what was that all about?
So the PR Point newsletter launched in March of 2002.
Okay.
And this was a much more direct attempt at digital publishing.
Okay.
And it featured interviews with international experts
Okay.
on emerging communication trends.
Yeah.
And it was distributed using autoresponders, which were essentially automated email systems
Right.
that would send out these pre-written messages, which was pretty new at the time.
Right. Yeah,
And what's really interesting is that it even covered the rise of blogs
Wow.
before blogs were mainstream.
Wow.
So that just shows you how forward-thinking he was.
Yeah, ahead of the curve.
And he was publishing this pretty frequently, every 10 days.
Wow.
However, despite this really forward-thinking content and the use of these, early digital tools, it just didn't gain enough readers.
Oh, wow.
So after 8 issues, they had to shut it down.
Oh, that's got to be, a bit of a setback, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it shows that just having a vision
Yeah.
isn't always enough, right?
Right.
Execution is important, timing is important,
Yeah.
all those things. What do you think was the most important thing that he learned from that?
Yeah, Prime Point Srinivasan said he really had to step back and analyze why the newsletter didn't resonate with the audience.
Yeah.
And that period of reflection was really crucial for him. And I think it probably informed his later strategy with Presence,
Yeah.
and helped him to better understand how people consume online content.
Yeah.
So, it really underscores the point that even if you have a strong sense of where things are going, you've got to understand the current landscape.
Right.
And you got to know how to connect with people
Yeah.
where they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward a few years.
Yeah.
He's got this early recognition of the internet's potential. He's laid this groundwork with the foundation.
Right.
He's learned all these crucial lessons from his early forays into publishing.
Yeah.
What was that moment that led to the birth of Presence?
So it appears from the information that we have that the turning point came in 2006.
Okay.
And it involved a suggestion from Dr. Abdul Kalam.
Wow.
He really encouraged Prime Point Srinivasan to bring back this idea of a digital magazine,
Okay.
but he said to focus on positive content.
Okay.
And so that was the catalyst for Presence.
So that's talk about an endorsement, right?
Yeah.
To have Dr. Abdul Kalam
Right.
suggesting that. So how quickly did things get moving?
Remarkably quickly.
Really?
In February of 2006, a core team came together.
Okay.
They made the decision to relaunch.
Okay.
They were going to use these more contemporary digital tools
Okay.
and distribution methods. They wanted to move very fast.
Okay.
They decided to launch in just 15 days.
Wow.
They set the launch date for March 6th, 2006.
15 days is not a lot of time.
No, it's a very quick turnaround.
Yeah.
And their initial focus was on communication for professionals.
Okay.
They even adopted a tagline, communicate the communication.
Okay, like that.
Yeah.
So launching is just the first step, right?
Right.
What was the reception like? I mean, was it easier this time around to get traction?
Well, it turned out that it was still a challenge to get interviews
Okay.
with high-profile figures for that very first issue. Even though Prime Point Srinivasan had a lot of connections,
Yeah.
a lot of people were hesitant to commit to a new, untested digital magazine.
Right. Yeah. Right.
The established media, print,
Yeah.
broadcast, that held a lot of sway.
Right.
But Dr. Y.S. Rajan,
Okay.
who was a close associate of Dr. Abdul Kalam and actually co-authored India 2020 with him,
Okay.
he really stepped up and was very encouraging
Okay.
and actually provided that first interview
Wow.
and actually launched the eMagazine online.
Oh.
And Suresh Kamath also was a supporter of the initiative
Okay.
and contributed an interview for that first issue.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so that early backing was crucial in getting Presence off the ground.
It must have been huge to have those kinds of figures.
Yeah.
Really getting behind it right away. It would have
Right.
given it instant credibility.
Right.
So now we're, a couple decades later,
Yeah.
20 years on.
Right.
Presence has some really unique aspects. I think one of the most distinctive is this Prince cartoon.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that became part of the magazine?
Yeah. So the Prince cartoon has really become a beloved part of the magazine.
Yeah.
And the story of how it came to be also goes back to Dr. Abdul Kalam.
Okay.
So in February of 2008, for the magazine's second anniversary issue,
Okay.
which had the theme of change, Dr. Kalam gave an exclusive interview to Presence.
Okay.
And during that interview, he suggested that they incorporate cartoons into the magazine
Interesting.
because he was personally a big fan of cartoons.
I like that.
And so, this led to a redesign of the magazine with some really helpful input from a communications expert named Tushar.
Okay.
And so following those discussions, Triambak Sharma,
Okay.
who's a very renowned cartoonist, he offered to create a monthly cartoon
Uh-huh.
featuring this character Prince.
Okay.
And then the first Prince cartoon was launched by Dr. Abdul Kalam himself
Cool.
in July of 2008. And since then, over 200 Prince cartoons have been published.
Wow.
And one of them even was featured in the Wall Street Journal
Really?
with permission.
Wow.
And Dr. Kalam was such a fan of this character
Yeah.
that he even said, I want other cartoonists to create these kind of iconic characters, like how we had R.K. Laxman's Common Man.
Yeah.
He wanted more iconic characters like that.
It's a wonderful anecdote.
Yeah.
And it shows the personal connection that Dr. Kalam had with Presence.
Right.
So beyond the Prince cartoon, what are some of the other things that really set Presence apart?
Well, there are a couple of really key milestones that I think are important to highlight.
Yeah.
So first of all, Presence has the distinction of being India's oldest digital-only magazine.
Okay.
It's never had a print version.
Wow.
And that's actually a fact that's been recognized by the India Book of Records.
Wow.
Also, Presence was a pioneer in integrating podcasts
Oh, wow.
alongside its articles way back in 2006. So they were really forward-thinking
Yeah.
in using multimedia.
Wow.
And then in 2007, they introduced this really innovative concept of guest editors.
Wow.
And they've had tons of prominent figures
Yeah.
from India and internationally
Yeah.
curating specific editions of the magazine.
That's so cool.
And then in 2008, Presence became the first eMagazine to be a media partner for international events.
Wow.
So, they were breaking new ground
Wow.
in an area that was really dominated by print and television at the time.
Right. So it's like consistently embracing new trends and
Yeah.
even like leading the way.
Yeah.
That's really, really impressive. It started out like with this focus on communication,
right.
but it broadened its scope, right?
Yeah, around its 61st edition, Presence transitioned
Okay.
from focusing only on communication
Yeah.
to really encompassing general journalism.
Okay.
And so while the core identity remained the same, they officially just started referring to it as Presence.
Yeah.
Like Presence, not Presence.
Right. Presence. Yeah.
Presence, got it, yeah.
And they changed their tagline from communication
Okay.
to spreading positive vibrations.
Okay, I like that.
So they were really focused on this idea of constructive and uplifting content.
Yeah, it goes beyond just the eMagazine though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It seems like there were some other initiatives that came out of that platform.
Right. So inspired by Dr. Abdul Kalam's vision for recognizing excellence,
Yeah.
the Crime Point Foundation and Presence actually started the Sansad Ratna Awards in 2010.
Okay.
And these awards are given to members of parliament to recognize their outstanding work.
Okay.
So that was one initiative. But they've also, spearheaded other volunteer-run initiatives like the Digital Journalists Association of India,
Wow.
Next Gen Political Leaders,
Wow.
and the Education Loan Task Force.
Wow.
So, they're really committed to civic engagement as well.
And all of the articles that they've published over the years
Yeah.
have been compiled into 49 ebooks,
Wow.
with some of those even seeing print editions.
Wow.
Dr. Abdul Kalam actually wrote the foreword for the first compilation
Wow.
after the 100th edition.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so they're now approaching their 50th book.
It really seems like Presence has become like this respected and influential voice,
Yeah.
especially, I think, among policymakers and thought leaders.
Right. The eMagazine enjoys really wide digital circulation,
Yeah.
and they have a lot of readers.
Yeah.
They're intellectuals and people in positions of influence.
Yeah.
Their editorials and cover stories are often closely followed,
Yeah.
and they're even considered by policymakers
Yeah.
who are shaping, policy.
Yeah.
And they're really proud of maintaining this neutral and analytical perspective
Yeah.
in their work.
Yeah.
And what's also remarkable is that Presence is the only surviving digital-only magazine in India that's been around for 20 years and has never used advertising.
That's wild.
It's all volunteer-run.
Wow.
It's really quite incredible when you think about it.
That really does speak volumes, right?
Yeah.
About their model.
Yeah.
And their commitment to what they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, no ads, totally volunteer run. That's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows a deep commitment to their principles.
Yeah. And it seems like that commitment hasn't gone unnoticed
Yeah.
because they've received a lot of recognition.
Yeah, they've received quite a bit of recognition over the years.
Yeah.
Notably, they received the Narada Award from the RSS,
Okay.
and that was their first award in the area of digital journalism.
Okay.
They also received the Golden Triangle Award from the Brahmakumaris,
Okay.
which was also their first recognition in digital journalism from that organization.
Okay.
And they've been recognized by, really esteemed organizations like the Association of Business Communicators of India
Yeah.
and the Public Relations Council of India.
Yeah.
So, they're really being recognized for their work.
And it seems like that recognition is really about promoting
Yeah,
positive and ethical journalism,
exactly.
which is so important these days.
Absolutely.
So when you look at this 20-year journey, what would you say are the things that have allowed Presence to not just survive, but to really thrive
Yeah.
in the digital world?
Well, I think the core principles are really about a commitment to high-quality, insightful content
Yeah.
and a really strict adherence to ethical journalistic standards,
Yeah.
and the fact that they've operated on a voluntary basis
Yeah.
and haven't solicited any advertising. I
Yeah.
think those have been absolutely central
Yeah.
to their ability to maintain their editorial independence.
Yeah.
And, they've also been lucky to have so many distinguished individuals on their editorial board over the years
Right.
who have contributed their expertise.
Yeah.
So that's been really important too.
Yeah. What about, what are some of the reflections that Prime Point Srinivasan himself has had? I mean,
Yeah.
he's gone from those early days of
Yeah.
super slow internet to 217 editions of the magazine, 49 ebooks.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that he's, thought about?
He often talks about the remarkable progress,
Yeah.
and he remembers a time when, just getting basic interviews was a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And now Presence has featured conversations with globally recognized figures
Right.
like Dr. Abdul Kalam,
Yeah.
Jimmy Wales of Wikipedia,
Wow.
Vinton Cerf, who's often called one of the fathers of the internet.
Yeah.
So, for him, I think this journey really underscores his belief that passion and persistence
Yeah.
can make a vision into a reality.
Yeah.
And despite all the changes in the digital landscape over the last 2 decades,
Yeah.
that core commitment to positive, ethical journalism has remained constant.
So really, the takeaway from our deep dive into Presence is that we have this truly pioneering, enduring digital publication in India.
Yeah.
It was born from one person's
Yeah.
understanding of the internet and its potential
Yeah.
very early on.
Right.
And it's been sustained for 2 decades
Right.
by a commitment to this ethical, positive journalism,
Yeah.
which was greatly inspired by Dr. Abdul Kalam.
Yeah.
And I think for our listeners
Yeah.
who want to, get a lot of information really quickly, I think this has been a really good overview
Yeah.
of this unique, impactful endeavor.
Yeah. And I think it raises a really important question for our listeners to think about.
Yeah.
Given all the challenges and transformations we're seeing right now
Yeah.
in traditional and digital media,
Yeah.
what can we learn from Presence?
Right.
From this model of positive,
Yeah.
voluntary,
Yeah.
advertisement-free journalism?
Yeah.
What could we take from that? I think that's something for us to think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we hope you'll do us next time for another deep dive.